Hey everyone, it's Ryan from GrowthBook, and in this video I'm going to show you how to integrate GrowthBook with GTM or Google Tag Manager so you can feature flag and run A/B experiments without touching your app's code base. Whether you are a marketer or a CRO agency or developer, this guide is going to get you up and running quickly. By the end of this video, you'll learn how to integrate GrowthBook, run experiments, track everything in GA4. So let's go. Before we get into the tutorial, let's get a sense of what we can build with this. So here I just have a very simple web page, but you can imagine it like a product card on an e-commerce site. And here it's for this couch. You can see that it just says it's $14.39. But what if we wanted to do an experiment where we tested whether this $14.39, if we could do something different in the way we presented it, that would boost conversions or sales. So what I can show you is that actually the experiment is running on this website, but because it just sees me as a single user, it's going to show me the same variation every time. But we can pretend we're a different user by changing our user ID. So let's change that to 3 and now refresh. And you can see that what happens is we get the variation now. So instead of the normal price, we get this kind of discounted effect where the original price is crossed out and now we're being served this the variation. And again, every time I refresh, it's going to show me the same variation. And all of this is being done through GrowthBook and Google Tag Manager. So let's go through the tutorial and see how it works. First, let's create an SDK connection in GrowthBook. Head to SDK Connection, SDK Connections, add SDK Connection, and let's call this GTM, but you can call it, of course, whatever you want. We're going to use script tag here as the type, and then click Save. Now, the one important thing that we need to get from this page is this data client key. So select this data client key, copy it, and then we're good to go. Let's add a feature flag to GrowthBook so we can run an A/B experiment. Go to Features and add feature. I'm going to call this Show Discount and give it the value type of Boolean. All the other defaults look good, so I will click Create. It'll give me this code snippet. I don't need it at the moment. And everything else is good. The feature flag is now set up. I will also add an experiment to it though by clicking Add Rule. Choose Experiment. I'm going to create a new experiment and I will call this experiment Show Discount. And if you were actually putting this in production, you would want to add your hypothesis and description, but we'll leave those blank for now. I'm going to have a 50-50 split in traffic. So that means that half my users will get false and half my users will get the value of true. And I'll continue. I'm going to start the experiment immediately, but you can see that there's lots of other values, different kind of targeting that you could implement. And here you'll set up your data source. So we'll have a big query there. We'll target our anonymous users. And if we were actually rolling this out, we would choose some different metrics to target. I clicked Save and everything is now ready to go. I'm back on that feature flag. And because we made a change, we need to review that and publish it. And once we do, the experiment is now live. So let's see how to implement it in Google Tag Manager. Next, head to Google Tag Manager. Go to Tags, and let's create a new tag. Click on Tag Configuration, and you want to choose Custom HTML. You're going to paste in some code here, which we have available in the written tutorial. And this basically loads GrowthBook so it runs on the page. And what you need to paste into this code snippet is that SDK client key that we created in the previous step. So go here to where it says client key and then paste in your key, click Save, and then click Add Trigger. And we want this to run on all pages. So we're going to choose all pages here, then save, and we can call this GrowthBook SDK save, and that part is done. GrowthBook is now initialized on all of your pages. Let's implement that feature flag we created in GrowthBook via Google Tag Manager. So the way that we're going to do that is to create another tag. So go again to tags, we'll create a new one, click tag configuration, and again it's going to be custom HTML, and then we will paste some code in here to the HTML field. And let's go over really quick what's happening in this block. This code's available in the written tutorial to copy and paste, but you can see pretty easily what's happening. So first we're checking to make sure that GrowthBook is there, and then if it is, we're going to add this function, and the function will apply feature flags. And the important kind of logic of this is right here, where that begins with this if statement. And the idea is that GrowthBook is going to check if the show discount feature flag, what the value is. And basically, because we have that experiment set up with it, it's going to determine whether the current user is in the control or in the variant. And if they're in the control, then they'll render one value, and if they're in the variant, they'll render the other. And what we're using that for is to either then show or not show this discount with the on the price element. And we'll see in a second how that actually looks, but this is basically how you can run feature flag experiments directly from Google Tag Manager. So we have that logic set up, and then we apply the feature flags function. We call the function, and then we set up an event listener in case any new data comes in that will then rerun this function. So this is all we need to do to get this feature flag and A/B experiment running on our app. And we'll do all pages here so that it always fires, and we will click save, and then we'll call this GrowthBook feature flag and A/B test. Save. And now the next part is we need to log the results of the A/B experiment, and we'll show you how to do that in a second. In order to capture the experiment data, we need to set up some tracking via the data layer in Google Tag Manager. In this tutorial, we'll be connecting with Google Analytics and BigQuery, but you can really use any kind of data warehouse here that you can integrate with Google Tag Manager. So the first part is we need to set up some custom data layer variables. So in Google Tag Manager, I'm going to come to variables, and I'm going to create two user-defined variables. So first I'll click new, click variable configuration, and again we want this data layer variable. I am going to call this experiment ID, and I will also call this experiment ID up here, and click save. Next, we are going to make another variable, data layer variable. This one is going to be called variation ID, and again we'll name it the same, variation ID. And this is what captures whether a user is in the control or one of the variations. We'll save that. Now that we have the data layer variables created, we need to set up a custom event trigger. So I'm going to go to trigger here, click new, click on trigger configuration, and come down to custom event. And in here I am going to put experiment viewed. I will also do experiment viewed up here and click save. Great, so now we have our custom event trigger set up. And then we now need to set up GA4. So I am going to come back to tags, new tag, tag configuration, Google Analytics, and Google Tag. And here you need to put in your measurement ID, which you can find in the admin area of Google Analytics. So I will paste that in here. It is initialized on all pages. I will here also put GA4, click save, and now the GA4 tag is set up through Google Tag Manager. And then finally, there's one last one to set up. We need to create a tag that sends that experiment viewed event data to Google Analytics. So again, this is another tag. So I'm going to click New, Configuration, Google Analytics. And here, though, we're going to do a GA4 event. We'll put in that measurement ID again. And then here, we're going to do the experiment viewed event. And we need to add in some event parameters. So I'm going to add in a parameter for the experiment ID. And we should be able here to use the data layer variable that we created in the earlier step. And then I'm going to add another parameter here of variation ID. And again, choose that from the data layer variable that we created earlier. In triggering here then, we are going to click this and do the experiment viewed trigger that we created. You can see kind of how everything is coming together. It seemed like a lot of different steps, but now it's coming together. And here we will call this a GA4 experiment viewed event. We will save. And once all of this is put together, we can now submit and publish, continue. And what this is good for here is to ensure that everything is set up correctly. In the next step, we'll show you how to kind of ensure that it's working and make sure all those values are coming through. Now that we have everything set up, something that we can do to ensure everything's working as intended, because you saw it's a lot of different pieces to put together, is we can click this preview button. And this will launch a basically debugging instance of your site. And so we're just running a local site here that has that product card of the couch that we saw at the beginning of the video. And I'm going to connect to it. So it'll take a second, it'll connect, it'll open that up and tell you that it's connected. So this is pretty cool. So you now know that the Google Tag Manager is connected to your site, so you can test everything out. Let's do a little refresh. You can see that we're getting the variant here. And I will go back now to the debugging instance. And on the left-hand side, you'll see that it's showing all of the different events that are firing. And so we can see our experiment viewed event here. I'll click on it. And we can then click on that actual event and see if the data looks right. So we have here the event settings table, and we can see that the parameter of experiment ID is the show discount, which is right. So it's the right experiment. And then the variation ID is 1, which means that's the variation of with the number crossed out. So that's right as well. So this verifies that everything is set up correctly and that that data is being passed to Google Analytics, which will then go on to BigQuery and then be interpretable or analyzable through GrowthBook. And that's it. You've successfully integrated GrowthBook with Google Tag Manager. And with some initial setup out of the way, you can now feature flag and A/B test without touching the code on your website or app. I know that there's a lot of steps that are involved. So if you have any trouble, we do have a Slack community that you can come and check out, or feel free to leave a comment below. There's also a written version of this tutorial that makes it easy to implement this integration. Keep on testing and see you in the next one.